to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. I'm excited that you're joining us this week. So I know, the title of the show was chosen with intent, right? That word change. And then how do we become enlightened around change? Well, in my over 6 decades on this earth, I've found out, I guess, or I realized that at the core of any change, for it to be maybe a smidge easier, a little bit easier, you have to be able to communicate with other humans, because usually when change is happening, there's multiple people involved. So here's the deal, whether you've chosen the change on this, whatever journey you're on, or it's been thrust upon you. In the show notes, you will find my communication style assessment. It really does shine a light on what are your natural communication superpowers and how can we lean into that. Flip side, your lowest score, that's probably the more important report, because when you're communicating with people 180 degrees differently than you, where is your message landing for? How is your message landing for them? Probably the more important question. So again, link is in the show note. Take the little quiz. It's pretty quick and you'll get those 2 reports. I hope it helps you navigate whatever change you're dealing with a little bit more ease and grace. Now, my quote today that I chose just to set the stage for my guests and my conversation is by Abraham Maslow. And Abraham says, "One can choose to go back towards safety or forward towards growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again." So I was recently interviewed on a podcast, and the host asked me, how do you continue to grow after so many years in business? And when I read this quote, it really hit the nail on the head for me. I feel like I have to always be in growth mode. I don't know if that's good or bad, right? But the reality is I'm probably living in fear most days too, just like all of you. The fear could be of me not delivering for my clients, right? Not showing up the way they deserve, recording a show where maybe my energy is off, or when I'm learning something new and afraid, am I going to look like a fraud? All of these things go through our head, right? We all have that negative record player. Mine goes up, the dial goes up, and I try to tune it back down, right? So I love to have, let me back up. With that record player up and down, that's the imposter syndrome right at work with all of us. I've got it, you've got it, we've all got it. So the more we discuss this topic of fear and the need of this kind of ongoing growth perspective, the easier it becomes for us to try things out, to find the secret sauce that's going to work for us or work for you. So who is my guest today, where we're going to really dig in and peel back her onion, if you will, and talk about transformative growth from a really bad place to a really good place. So who is this amazing guest? She's a good friend of mine. She is the self-proclaimed data nerd. Rebecca Bertoldi has created countless data-driven strategies for small local businesses, tech startups, and multi-8-figure global businesses. She was part of personal development leader Mary Morrissey, who's absolutely amazing, part of her marketing team. And her unique experience helped her craft compelling campaigns that connect with her clients' audiences, increasing the brand outreach, profitability. And when she's not creating campaigns, you can find Rebecca at home in Connecticut with her hubby and her fur babies. So Rebecca, thanks for being on and being very vulnerable with my audience today. And I think that's how we learn best, when we hear others' journey stories and then we think, oh, that's me, or oh, I could do that, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is inspire people to embrace the change. So thank you so much for being on.
You for having me. Yeah. And I feel like I heard somebody speak and it made me want to speak for speak out so other people would hear the messages. So that's why I've kind of done these kind of things where I am getting a little vulnerable with people, even though that's not I don't like being vulnerable. Who does? Right. And I relate to you in that I need to feel like I am moving forward, or I feel like I'm moving backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. I say to my kids all the time, they're men, 25, 28 at the time of this recording. But, I say to them, if you're not learning, really, when you choose to because everything's a choice in life. And if you choose to stagnate, that's okay. Just know you're dying. That becomes a slow death. So by learning every day, even if it's something silly, it's learning, it's growing your mind, right? And it keeps that, I think it keeps motivating us to move forward. At least that's how I look at learning, growth. They're kind of combined together. How long have you been would you say you've been on your own personal development journey?
I would say so. My personal development journey, when I really started getting into that kind of work, like I was intentionally doing that work, is about 6 years now. But my healing journey started back in 2009, 2008.
Okay.
So it was a long road to get to a point where I was like able to function really. So for me, my first marriage, not spectacular. I got married at 21 to my middle school sweetheart. So maybe not the best decisions being made there, but I didn't, you don't always realize that you're in a bad spot if you haven't had a great, like someone to show you what a great relationship is.
Yeah.
And I entered into this relationship and it was, we were teenagers and I didn't know any better. And then once we got married, it was so controlling. The mental abuse was so bad.
Oh,
And 4 years later, I finally was like, that's enough. I wanted to get out. And he did too, to an extent. He said that he didn't want to live the life we were living. And when I finally said, okay, bye, and pushed him out, something triggered in his head where he came back and got very violent. And there was just a horrific night of bad things. So from there, I was broken.
ugh.
And I also went through a series of miscarriages, and it was it was such a dark time in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to depress you all out there. I'm just trying to show you where this started, where this journey started. Yeah. So I really needed to find a way to even see the beauty in things and to not be scared to go outside. Like there were so many things going on there, but I just realized that nothing looked good to me. And one weekend, my grandmother, she had a house on Block Island in Rhode Island, and
Nice.
she invited me out. And it was like, she was like pulling teeth to get me out there too. I don't know why. And when I finally went out for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is a beautiful place. And it was so relaxing to me. And I couldn't quite, I didn't understand why it was so good out there. And it was the sound of the ocean and all of these things came in to calm me. And I was on an island, and I didn't, nobody knew where I was. I felt safe. And one night I went to, there's this north point on the island that it's quite a bit of a hike out there. And there were all of these seals hanging out on the beach.
Wow.
And there was this glorious sunset. I mean, the whole sky was just reds and purples and oranges.
Oh.
And it was just like, wow, I can't believe I'm witnessing this right now.
Yeah.
And I got a gazillion pictures. I'll have to share one with you. But I was able to get one of the lighthouses silhouetted with that sunset in the back.
Funny.
And I was like, wow, I really, it was like looking at a sunset for the first time, like you've never seen the colors and the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, and I'm like looking and I'm like, I knew something was different. So then I started chasing sunsets and I started just building up all of these photos of all these different places and sunsets, and Block Island always had my favorite sunsets.
Of course.
And that's where it kind of began, where I kind of started to feel like, okay, I can do this. I can take a deep breath and I can move forward. So from there, it was a journey.
Yeah. And but see, I think, right, that was, you probably were on a journey before that. You did, because you had to go through what you went through to hit that brick wall, literally that brick wall. Go into this despair but you needed to do that to know and see the sun, in this case, the sunset or the beauty of the seals, and to reground you, right, in something that's so beautiful when you're in darkness. It was funny, as you were saying, your grandmother was trying to get you to come to Block Island, and you were fighting. It was like pulling teeth. When we're depressed, when we're in a really bad place, we try to isolate, and that's the worst thing we can do. But you don't want to have conversations. You don't want to take a shower. You don't want to leave the house, right? You want to stay in your dirty sweatpants or whatever, your worn out sweatpants. So that's probably why it was like pulling teeth, because you're thinking, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to be nice to anyone. I just want to wallow. And that's where I feel that's where it becomes dangerous, because at what point do we give up the wallow, right? The pity, because you should feel sadness with what you went through. You have to feel it, right? But you also have to come out the other side. And going to Block Island opened the gate for you to go to the other, or start the journey to the other side. And you never know what it's going to be. Isn't that funny?
Right.
Your grandmother was your lifeline. But so, yeah, it's cool how when we were in really bad places, you can't see the forest from the trees. And then someone drops you the line. We just have to be open to taking the line. And that's easy. Listen, that's easier said than done when we're in utter despair and in failure mode. To me, that's like failure mode, where, your body couldn't give you a baby. Like, are you kidding me? Then he's abusive. Are you kidding me? Then you try to leave and he becomes even more violent. You're like, I can't do anything right? You feel like that you just can't do anything right. Darkness is real. What after that? So I love that visual, because I believe that nature can bring us back to life if you're open to seeing that beauty, right? So I commend you for that, but I commend your grandma for going like, get your butt out here, kiddo,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and that she didn't give up on you. She probably knew what you needed, right? Because people who are older than us usually can see what we need before we see it, because we haven't lived the life that they have or the experience they have. So thank you, grandma. But what was the next, after you started chasing these sunsets and thinking, wait a minute, maybe there is beauty out there, it's not just darkness. What were those baby steps that you took to, and I'm sure it was slow in the beginning, and then I'm sure the momentum built, but what were some of those early steps you took in your own personal development to kind of kick away that past and to create this future that you really did desire?
So what I had, so I sense patterns. Like, I'm just someone that notices patterns, whether it's in data or it's in life and with people. And I noticed that when I was out on Block Island, I felt so calm. I felt like I could make progress. And then when I went back home, I was a nervous wreck again. And I just couldn't breathe anymore. So I was starting to see those things. So I was experimenting with, is it the house? Is it the house that I got attacked in that's triggering me every day? I also, and I had some pretty severe PTSD that was going on as well. So me being out on Block Island, I felt safe. All those things weren't affecting me. Yeah. So Nana was very, very gracious with how often I could go out. And, my family wasn't really using it in the winter, and I didn't mind it in the winter, because it's still like, that's when all the seals and the whales and stuff are out there.
Yeah.
So I would go out there, and she was like, just let me know when you want to go out for a weekend. And I would just go. And I wasn't really into like meditation and stuff at the time, but I would just go and sit. But I think what I was doing is meditating. So I would just go and sit and listen to the ocean and think about things, and how can I take those next steps? So I, of course, got professional help. I went and I saw a few different therapists that I tried a few different ones out. And the ones that really worked for me, like I was seeing a regular therapist, and we were building, my life back. But I also went to an EMDR specialist, and that's eye movement, dissociation, and reprocessing. And basically they do these exercises where you do have to bring yourself back to the moment, but they're doing this thing to engage both sides of your brain. So the logical part steps in.
Wow.
So some people do it with hand movement, like that's what mine did. Some people do it with lights, some people do it with sound, and it allows you to basically convince your brain that this is what happened, you're safe, and it allows it almost like your brain can put it to bed. It can put it in I call it like my filing box.
Yeah.
So sometimes those feelings just don't get filed away because your brain doesn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
That's how it was explained to me. So that was like the therapy that had the biggest relief first.
Yeah.
Where I felt like I could, because it was just really hard to exist, honestly.
Sure.
So that was the first one. And then when I started realizing maybe it's the house I can't be in this house anymore.
Mm.
So I moved to California. I got as far away from the problem as I possibly could because I grew up in New York. And my sister was out in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I went to visit her, and I was like, I could just start a whole new life here and not have to worry about anything because I still had my ex-husband was still driving by the house. He was still doing that kind, even though, I mean, after the restraining order had expired, he was still doing that kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know where he is. I don't know if I'm safe, and I couldn't function. So I go out to California, and I was so active out there. Like there's just so many beautiful things to see, and it was a new area, and it sparked that travel bug in me, where I really wanted to start seeing other places because I was just, in my own little world in New York. Like I didn't even explore the Northeast when I lived in New York.
Yeah.
I've explored more now in Connecticut than I had the whole 30 something years in New York.
Yeah. Mindset.
So, what's that?
Mindset.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I grew more confidence in myself, and it was starting to show, like, my boss, the first job I got out there was for a promotional products company. And he was like, have you ever been to Prague? And I'm like, nope, never left the country. And he was like, go get your passport. You're going to Prague in a couple weeks. And I'm like, okay. And from there, he was like, I know you've always wanted to go to Italy. Why don't you go to Italy, finish out? Because I was creating the marketing materials they were opening a new location in Prague.
Cool.
And he was like, do you want to go to Italy? I'm like, I sure do. So he's like, working vacation, go to Italy. And I was by myself. And it was like the single most, in my opinion, the bravest thing I've ever done was to go to a foreign country by myself.
Yeah.
I was terrified, but I was excited. Somebody actually gave me, she was like, you were terror-sighted. I was like, yes, I was terror-sighted.
Oh, I love that phrase.
And yeah, it was just so like, I had felt like, oh my God, I've made such a huge progress in this journey right then.
Yeah.
Like I'm standing over the Coliseum. I'm like, how did I get here? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I want to comment. So it's interesting. You started that you were a data nerd, right? And that was in your bio, which I love. But see, it's interesting because you said I was really good at seeing patterns in data and metrics and stuff like that. The skill is there. And we forget as humans, right? I teach sales, that we forget sometimes having that empathy or great listening skills. That makes you good in sales, right? But we think, oh, doesn't everybody do that? Like, can't everybody analyze data? Right. But you had, for whatever divine intervention that happened, but you took that skill, that innate skill of that data analysis, and you started to see the patterns in your life. So those transferable skills, whatever that switch was, that you looked at it from a different frame of reference, probably through the therapy and stuff like that. That's a beautiful thing because we all have, I believe, we come to this earth, right, with these amazing skills, whatever they are for you, and they vary from person to person. That's why we're so uniquely beautiful. And so you had this core skill, but you never used it in your personal perspective. And as soon as someone, and that's the other thing too, Rebecca, I think when someone teaches us or shows us something, you have two options. You know it now. You can't unknow what was just learned or taught or shared. You could choose not to do anything with it. Right. So there's always choice involved, but something triggered and you leaned into that data to see the pattern. So kudos to that. The other thing, I think the huge pattern interrupt of saying the house. The house has memories. The house has energy. Your energy is in that house. It was probably the best thing you could have done. And again, divinely intervention that you intuitively thought maybe it's the house. Probably the house was a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. But moving across the country, again, being courageous, I think little by little you opened your Pandora's box, if you will, so that you can explore more and experience more and allow all of that darkness and despair to kind of fade away naturally at your pace, right? Because, and that's another thing, you know, I had a cousin who lost, I think they were going to get engaged, and they were both around the 40 mark. It was a tragic accident. And he went for grief counseling and all of that. And one day it was the holidays, and he said and I'll never forget this, he said to me, you know, how long do you grieve? And I was taken back, and I said, oh my gosh, I don't know. I think it depends on the relationship. It depends on what the situation was. But whenever there's a loss, in this case, it was death. In your case, it was death of the relationship, right? What is grieving? You know, how long? And I think that's what people say. It's been a year. Who are you to tell someone how to grieve or how to process through these you had PTSD. Well, it's a year, move on. So that you identified the patterns, did something about it, right? Took the bull by the horns, as they say, moved across country. By the way, it's nice weather, right? So that beach environment was there all the time. Those sunsets were there for you all the time. So that craving probably is what made you move, out west. And now you're back east, where you belong, by the way, my East Coast friend. But all of these things, as you were talking, I'm picturing it, that movement and that shifting. And your journey is going to be different than anybody else who maybe has a similar situation. But hearing the courage to say, enough, I can't do this anymore. Let me try this. And oh, by the way, you moved to California. Your sister was out there. You hated it. Yeah, come back.
Right, exactly.
Right. Nothing is in stone that it's forever. And you make that decision and you never could turn back. And I think people forget that. So they're afraid to take this step for fear of what they're going to lose. You can always come back, right? You can always rewind, so to speak, right?
And I chose not to go back to New York because I didn't want to have a business in New York with all the new, they made it harder to have a business in New York.
Yeah.
So, but I did want to stay near the water. I knew that. So when I was initially looking in Rhode Island, because that's, there's so much water surrounding there. Yeah. But the realtor was like, come over to Connecticut. You're going to get more house for your money. And I'm in a great spot to access the water and go to Mystic and close to the airports and still close enough to family in New York.
Yeah.
And I think the switch for me when I started seeing the patterns was I did not want to repeat this. Like, as I had noticed, I didn't have the best relationships my whole life. And I said, how do I stop this pattern? And that's what it was. She was like, A, I needed to be more self-aware. And B, I was like, how do I recognize those red flags in somebody well before we get to this point? So I started really studying human behavior and honestly, like a lot of true crime. So there was a lot of I like watching the psychological shows that look at serial killers and stuff like that. I know it sounds weird, but I was like, I never want to be in the presence of a predator again. And that was a good source to learn of those behaviors, and what I'm looking for.
Yeah. It's so I love the psychological dramas. There's a show, Irrational.
I haven't seen that one.
It's so good, but they're hour episodes every week, but he's all about the psychology behind why we have biases, why the gang mentality, right? And he runs these experiments he's a professor in university, but then he also helps the police, right? Uncover, like you were saying, who the serial killer is or whatever. Fascinating, because the human mind is miraculous. We have so much capacity for love, and we also have, right, that human capacity for the dark side, right, where somebody's not wired right for whatever psychologically. So I think it's so interesting. True crimes, right? But again, it's an education for you to look at things from that different perspective. And I think, Rebecca, the more we can like, oh, that's interesting way to look at serial killers and human behavior. Oh, and love. And they've been married 90 years and look, they're still in love. What's behind that human being? So again, very different perspectives, but the more perspectives we have, or the more light we can shine on, right, the human soul, if you will, I just feel like we learn more faster and we can grow even faster. I'm curious, this personal development. Now you're a business owner too, right? You do the marketing. You're very creative, of course. So I want to talk about business too, right? Along with our own evolution, our own transformation. Usually that has an impact on our business. Has all of this personal development work that you've done, right? I'm going to say out of necessity, and I commend you for the courage to do it, by the way. But has that helped you with your creativity as a marketing executive? This is what you do for a living, and you help businesses grow. So is there a connection?
There's definitely a connection. And there was a switch at some point from out of necessity to I just want to become the best version of myself ever.
Momentum.
Sure. Yeah, there was a point where I was just like, I want more.
Yeah.
And so I started with like Successful Thinkers as a group. And then I met my first coach from the Brave Thinking Institute, which is how I ended up getting connected with Mary Morrissey along the way. But
cool.
It was, so what the miraculous thing that happened, I went to this event because she was actually a client and I wanted to see how like what I'm promoting, experience it. And I was still at a point where my PTSD would like kind of shut my brain off midday. So, I would be like, how am I going to ever have a career that I want if I can't even have a brain all day? So I go to this event and I'm blown away by the tools I'm learning and the things that I'm learning. And I'm like, okay, my parents never taught me any of this stuff. That this is all the woo-woo, and nobody on the East Coast likes woo-woo, right? So
practical.
Yeah. So that she gave me exercises to do. And within a week, I had my full functionality back to work.
Wow.
It was that crazy. It was a matter of affirmations and changing my subconscious. That's really what it was my subconscious. So I'm like, okay. So now I'm like getting excited about this work. Now for me, I'm the data nerd. I'm very logical. And so when I'm promoting products, I'm like, logically, yes, you need this. Why wouldn't they want this? But I know now that people don't buy with logic. They buy with emotion. So as I became more self-aware, as I met more people that are doing this work and we share more of our experiences, I'm getting more and more knowledgeable about how other humans function out in the world other than me and the serial killers, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like, okay, so this is how other people process emotions and this is how they see things. And it opened up my world, my marketing world, to all new ways of communicating and how I did my presentations to people. Even when I'm teaching, I love to share my knowledge of marketing everywhere, but I was, someone said to me, like, you're just a little bit technical when you're talking about it. And, you're very logical in these things, but I don't see the connection of how people are going to buy. And I'm like, okay, why don't you see it? It's logical, So it took me a while to really figure out how other people were approaching situations and be able to incorporate it into marketing.
Yeah, I love it. It's so funny. I use iceberg all the time in my training, and your energy, right, with your clients, they're feeling your energy, whether you realize it or not. So what are they feeling? I would want to control that. Right? So you're putting out the right vibes so people are receptive to you, right? And build the know, like, trust factor, all those things that we know in sales and marketing. But I always use the iceberg. So this week I taught a class and I kept saying to them, remember the iceberg? And they're like, yeah, like they were dumbfounded that 95% of our decision making is may from your gut, from your subconscious, whatever you want to call it. The top 5% is the logic. So that's why I'm giggling as you were saying that. But you need this. And this is what my bankers, but they need it, Connie. And I go, you know, they need it. But you haven't communicated for them. You
Right.
haven't tapped into how they're going to use it to say, oh, I need this, right? I
Mhm.
said, so you could think they need it all until they think they need it. They're not buying from you.
Right. Right.
Happening all subconsciously. It's fascinating.
It
I
is.
have one more question.
Yeah.
So that has helped you as a marketer. That has helped you with your business, right? As a person in business, right? How has it helped you as a person running the business? Did that just make sense, or is that an odd question?
I completely got it, I think. So I approach things way differently now. So there's more of a calmness to me. I'm not like frantic. I'm not like sitting here with 700 cups of coffee, and just trying to get through the day on caffeine. And I take better care of myself. I make sure that, I need to make sure that I move every day because I won't be able to focus if I don't.
Yep.
My mind-body connection is so much stronger. And really, like, I have had clients way back when say, okay, this is just too much. This process is too stressful for me. I don't think we're
Oh,
the right match. And I couldn't understand why they were saying that back then. I totally get it now. But
mm,
nowadays I hear, "Oh, I love your calm energy and you're just supportive and you help me calm down about technology." you know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there's definitely a huge shift in me in the way I talk to people, the way I approach people. Um, and of course, I still have more to go. Like I never want to stop evolving because eventually I'm going to be, well, I am someone spectacular now, but
You,
eventually I'm going to be even
amen,
more
sister.
spectacular, you know, and,
Yes.
and there's no end to how great we can be. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because all these tools that you've learned foundationally, because events are still going to happen. Life is still going to happen that you've never experienced before, right? It is what it is. That's life. It could be cruel sometimes. It could be a cruel teacher. But if you always learn from and fill in the blank, whatever's happening to you, because bad things happen to everybody, nobody escapes that. It's how you respond, how you learn. So all of these things you're learning and putting into practice are going to end up helping you long term as these weird situations or these frustrating or scary situations or sad situations happen. It's interesting because I think that as we build these tools, we become enlightened, right? Enlightenment of change, we become enlightened. But I tell you, Rebecca, I say to my husband all the time when situations happen, and he'll say to me, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I'm out of sorts." And he goes, "Why?" I go, "I don't know. I'm percolating." That's my answer. I'm percolating on it. He goes, "All right, let me know if you need anything." And we giggle about it because I don't know. Sometimes I don't know why I'm out of sorts. And it could be something silly somebody said that triggered something from when I was a kid, right? You don't know where it's coming from. But if you don't pause to say, "I'm out of sorts, but why am I out of sorts?" Your out of sortness is going to spiral down instead of stopping the hemorrhaging or bleeding, so to speak, using the tools, right? But you have to consciously do this. So just pause when you feel out of sorts, whatever that means to you, right? That's what I say. I'm out of sorts. I'm going to percolate. But then I say to him, "I'm so enlightened. How come I still can't figure this out yet?" Because we're still on the journey, right? We're getting to the top of the mountain, but we're not there yet. So it's just one step in front of the other. So I love your perspective. And oh, by the way, your how far you've grown, because you're still very young, but how far you've grown from that very bad situation, right? That bad life situation, but how you've parlayed that and translated that into what you're doing now and thriving and helping others thrive in their business. It's pretty cool to see. And, we're approaching the end of 2024. If you're listening to this episode in the future, we're approaching the holiday season. And it's a really good time, Rebecca, for all of us to pause and look back. What did we accomplish this year? We're
yeah.
very good at looking back and saying, I didn't do this and I do that all the time too. I'm really good at beating myself up. But I'm really trying to get into the habit at the end of the year, especially. What did you do that was freaking amazing, because we've all done something that's amazing this year. We just go, what's the big deal? It is a big deal when we accomplish great things, and you're living proof of that. So thank you so much for being on and sharing. And everybody, I had Rebecca on my other show, Changing the Sales Game, plug for the other show. And I will post that link in this show notes because we talked all about creativity, and we talked about business, and we talked about marketing. So if you're thinking about starting a business, or you're in marketing, or you're in business for yourself, make sure you tune into that episode as well. Rebecca brought her amazing, calm, very clear ideas. So you literally in that episode too, you will walk away with some clear steps to take from that. If you are interested in connecting with Rebecca, whether it's professionally or you're in a bad place and you'd like
Always happy to talk. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
please.
We're in this together, right, Rebecca?
Yeah.
We're in this together. Email her at rebecca@rebeccabertoldi.com. I will put that in the show notes. Also, check out her website. She's doing amazing things out there. She has amazing resources. I use many of them. Her website is rebeccabertoldi.com. And I know you have a gift for everyone, which I'll put in the show notes. Can you tell everybody what that is?
Yeah. So we all post on social media for our businesses and such, and each platform has a different algorithm. So I made a fun presentation about how to know what they're looking for on each platform. And because algorithms can be a little boring, I paired them with some old TV characters. So it's a lot of fun, and you get to kind of see the personality of each one, and then you know who you're working with a little bit.
I love it. So she's a dork with personality.
Yeah.
Right? I love it. I love it. I love it. Again, that's the right and left lobe of the brain. You're using
Yeah.
both all the time. So I think that's so cool. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Check it out and check out the website. She really does. Rebecca has a ton of resources out there. She has a bunch of links to stuff she uses in her business. She shared them with me, and I'm using them in my business as well. So check them out. Important stuff. And again, she's vetted them. Remember, she's a data nerd. So I trust her because I'm not going to test. She does the testing. I do the using. So check out the website. A ton of really cool resources in there as well. Rebecca, as always, thank you for just being vulnerable with us and sharing that story. I think the more people understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel, even though we're in the darkness of the tunnel, I think that can inspire people to take action. So thank you for sharing your story and just your beautiful energy. I love spending time with you, my friend.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. And again, like I think the more we talk about the way we are healing ourselves and are growing ourselves, like the more it's not going to be the woo, like so let's all become the best version of ourselves.
Yeah. And self-care isn't selfish, right?
No.
That was a hard lesson for me to learn, where I put everybody else first, thinking that I was the martyr, right? This was what you were, I have to do that. The have tos is nonsense. But where's that balance? And I think you've done a real nice job of staying with, the pendulum goes to the left and the right. So going from very left or right with the situation and coming back to the middle, I think you're doing a real nice job navigating that pendulum, kind of being in that very grounded part, right? Which is great for us as humans. We get more done. We just get more done.
If I could say one more thing, like I always say, it takes a village to manage my brain. So I also have friends that I tell them, this is what you're looking for, like behaviors out of me that tell you that I'm starting to spiral. So I tell people like what it is that they need to know, because sometimes I don't see it. Like if you're in it, and I've gotten better about this, at being able to catch it right away, but I make sure that the people around me that love me know what to look for, so that they know they can bring it to my attention and say, it may be time to call another therapist, or it may be time to work on this some more. Yeah. So don't be afraid to get more people involved in your mental health. And I have 2 coaches and a therapist and a meds lady, like, so there, and then all of my friends that are supportive. So it's not just me on my own. I'm never alone, and neither are you.
Yeah. It does take a village, and we're going to have good days and bad days. Just
That-
try to come out of the bad days, right? We have to create more good days in our life. I think as a global, right, phenomenon, I think if we can raise that energy, things become a little bit easier globally, which would be kind of nice. We all have the power to impact that, right? But we have to start with ourselves. My friends,
Exactly.
I love you. Thank you for sharing again and being vulnerable. I hope everybody that was listening, I hope if we've touched one person, that to me is success, huge success. So again, I hope your story inspires others to seek counseling, seek advice, seek help from the proper places. So thank you again for your candor. And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together, no matter where you are on your journey of change, good, bad, and the ugly, right? We're always in on that realm. I hope that my guests and I provide ideas, stories, and tips that you can activate immediately. Some of the ideas that Rebecca shared with her journey, you can get back in nature. That's always a good one. Just stop, pause, meditate. And by the way, I want to comment on meditation really quickly. My one son, he cannot sit and meditate, but he knows when he's off. He says, Mom, out of sorts. He will go up to the park and he does, I think they call that a spiritual shower, where he just walks through nature and he comes back a new kid. And it's literally meditation for him to be in nature, but he needs to move his body versus sitting still. So don't think meditation is sitting, going to right? It could be just being out in nature. So whatever moves your soul, sunsets, the beach, the ocean, watching the seals, again, going in the mountains, whatever it is, find something that helps ground you and makes your soul come back to life. You all got something. You just have to figure out what that is so you could tap into it with frequency, especially depending on where you're located. So Rebecca, thank you again. Thank you all for tuning in. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.com. I am truly inspired that you join me weekly on this journey of enlightenment, right? Of change, dealing with change and making it all good stuff out there. Information's a beautiful thing. If you do nothing with it, guys, it's just information. Again, you have a choice. You're at a crossroad. The information shared today, the vulnerability, the resources, all shared. Use them. That's your call to action. With action comes just magic on the back end. I love you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Rebecca, thank you, my friend. I love you.